Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They ruled the galaxy. Until one human ship stood against them. The Varnak Empire didn't fear much. For over 200 years, they swept through galaxies like fire through dry leaves, planet after planet fell, civilizations collapsed, and resistance crumbled like old stone under their weight. Their ships were massive living fortresses bred for war. Their soldiers, genetically engineered, stood twice the size of humans and had no word for mercy in their Gyutal language. They had never heard of Earth until they did. Humanity had just begun to stretch its fingers beyond the solar system, a few scattered colonies here and there, Mars, Europa, a mining outpost in Proxima Centauri. We weren't a threat, we were ants playing with rockets, they thought. But the Varnak had protocols, eliminate before infestation, they called it. They didn't even send a fleet, just one war cruiser, the Runback, and a small escort squad was enough to wipe out any new species and file a report. They were expecting another easy cleanse. Then came the Solace. Not the biggest ship, not the most advanced, hell, even back then it was running on half-patched software and an engine core older than some of its crew, but it had something the Varnak couldn't measure, its captain, Elijah Rohr. They first encountered each other near the edge of the Gliese system. The Varnak vessels dropped out of warp, their hulls black as void and bristling with weapons. The Solace was alone, stationed there for basic patrol duty, just eyes on the edge of human territory. Rohr didn't run. "Tell command we've got company," he said, calm as ever, lighting a cigarette in the command chair as red lights started flashing. "And prep everything we've got, we're holding this damn line." His officers looked at each other. "Captain, that's a Varnak cruiser," he said, his voice steady. "You see another ship here ready to make a stand?" "No, sir." Then it was us. The Solace launched every drone armed, every torpedo, and powered its main cannon, an old fusion lance that hadn't been used in 5 years. The crew braced, everyone knew it was a suicide mission, everyone except Rohr, or maybe he knew and didn't care. The Varnak opened fire first, blue plasma arcs tore through space, lighting up the void, shields screamed under the pressure. One of the outer hull compartments burst into flame, and still Rohr barked orders like a man playing chess instead of facing death. "Divert power from the life support on Deck 4, he shouted. "I want those damn guns back online." He made every shot count. The Solace ducked, dodged, and struck back like a rabid animal. Smaller Varnak escorts were the first to go, one exploded into a cloud of fire and debris, the other was crippled and drifted off into the black, its engines dead. Then it was just the Runback and one human ship. Rohr stood up from his chair, watching the colossal cruiser loom on the screen. "Let's dance, you oversized lizard." The Runback underestimated him. It moved in slow, steady, powerful motions, it wasn't built for quick kills, it expected fear, surrender, hopelessness. But Rohr didn't give them that, he gave them hell. The Solace rammed forward in a move no sane captain would have tried, slid under the Varn's belly, and fired 2 torpedoes point-blank at its undercarriage. The resulting explosion cracked through the Runbacka's lower shield barrier, and for the first time in decades, a Varnak cruiser limped. Rohr grinned, blood on his forehead, sparks flying behind him. "Welcome to humanity, bastards." And out there across the stars, as military channels lit up and desperate calls were made, one message repeated over and over: the line is holding. The damage to the Runback wasn't fatal, but it was humiliating. The Varnak didn't just conquer, they obliterated. Entire star systems had vanished under their iron grip, and yet here, at the edge of some forgotten system orbiting a yellow dwarf, one primitive ship had managed to tear through their armor, not because it was stronger, but because it was angry. The Solace didn't retreat, it couldn't. The engines were overheating, the left stabilizer was half blown off, and 2 decks were without power. Medbay was filled with groaning bodies, and the lights flickered like the ship itself was gasping for breath, but Rohr stood tall in the middle of it all. His first officer, Lieutenant Vega, had a nasty burn across her cheek and a makeshift sling around her arm, but her eyes were still sharp. "Captain, we need to retreat to Titan, we're running on fumes, and if we go, they'll burn every colony between here and Earth," she urged. Roar replied while scanning the status screen, "They need time, we're going to buy it." "How?" "With prayers and duct tape," came the reply. Roar gave a tired smirk. "Prayers are optional, duct tape's holding engineering together." The crew shared a bitter, cracked laugh. It helped. They were soldiers, trained to fight, but this was survival against a goddamn monster, and their captain still had fight in him. The Runvac didn't make the same mistake twice. Its next assault came hard and precise. Plasma beams lanced toward the Solace with surgical accuracy. The shields flared white, then collapsed entirely, hull breaches opened on decks 3 and 5, and a firestorm devoured the lower cargo bay. 27 crew members lost their lives in an instant. Roar didn't flinch, he marched to the tactical display and started plotting an intercept course. "They think we're dying," he murmured to himself. "Let's show them what dying humans can do." The Solace didn't fight back with strength, it fought back with desperation. Roar ordered every last warhead in the arsenal prepped for close-range detonation, turning the ship into a flying minefield. "If they come too close," he instructed the gunnery chief, "light them up. I want that cruiser to choke on our fury." When the Runvac moved in for the kill, expecting another easy demolition, it was met with wave after wave of shrapnel, molten debris, and kamikaze drones screaming across its flanks. It didn't stop the cruiser, but it slowed it, and in war, even a few minutes can change everything. While Roar was holding the line, the rest of humanity was waking up. Earth's High Command received his last transmission, partially scrambled and glitching, but the message was clear: we are not backing down. If this is our grave, we'll bury them with us. Those words hit Earth like a bolt of lightning. Civilian networks broadcast the message worldwide: colonists on Mars, miners on Europa, freighter pilots, and ex-Marines all watched the lone ship standing against the impossible. Roar wasn't just buying time, he was lighting a fire in the heart of a species. On the bridge of the Solace, he wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at the cracked viewport. The Runvac was damaged again, scorch marks along its side, flickering lights on its underbelly. It wasn't used to this kind of fight, it wasn't used to being challenged. "They'll call for reinforcements soon," Vega noted. "So will we," Roar replied. And for the first time in history, humanity might actually show up. He didn't know it yet, but halfway across the system, a half-retired dreadnought called the Vanguard was warming up its engines. A Martian warclan had intercepted the signal and was already en route. Even a civilian convoy from Saturn, armed with illegal rail guns and an unhealthy amount of rage, was joining the fray. The Varnak had awakened something they didn't understand: not a war machine, not a military force, they had awakened humanity. The Runvac paused its advance, not out of fear, it didn't understand that emotion, but confusion. This resistance was illogical. According to its war protocols, species in the early galactic stages lacked the ability to respond to overwhelming force. They submitted, they scattered. But the Solace had not only resisted, it had inflicted damage worse than they had expected. More human ships appeared on long-range scans, crewed by Varnak standards, unorganized and mismatched, but they were coming fast. Aboard the Solace, Roar stood over the command console, eyes bloodshot and face smeared with ash. His voice cracked over the internal comms: "All hands, listen up. We've got incoming friendlies, they're answering the call." A beat of silence passed, then cheers broke out, muted by fatigue and grief, but real. It was hope, the kind you taste after swallowing nothing but dread. Lieutenant Vega leaned over the display. 3 ships just dropped out of warp: the Vanguard, the Osiris, and, oh God, that's the Iron Widow, that's a Martian warclan flagship. Roar grinned through the pain in his side. "Tell them the line still holds." Outside, space shimmered as the newcomers fell into formation behind the battered Solace. The Vanguard, twice the size of the Solace and armed with mass drivers older than Earth's constitution, broadcast a single message on all channels: Earth's not home, try hell. The Runvac command AI adjusted its threat assessment. Humans were no longer classified as developing species, they were now a disruptive force. It escalated from hyperspace and summoned reinforcements, 2 additional destroyer-class Varnak vessels, sleek and jagged monsters with blood-red cores. Their arrival sent ripples through the stars like a deep growl in the dark. Warning sirens howled again on the Solace, but the crew did not flinch this time. Roar looked toward the viewport. So, they brought friends. Looks like it's a party, Vega muttered as she buckled into her seat. The Iron Widow moved first, breaking formation and blasting toward the closest Varnak destroyer like a missile of rage. Martians had a reputation for being unhinged, they wore their scars like medals, and their weapons were illegal in every civilized system. They didn't care, they'd seen what the Varnak did to a settlement near Syrisur, burned it from orbit with no survivors. The Martians had never forgotten. The clash was chaos, lasers lit up the void, metal screamed and exploded in silence. The Osiris flanked on the left, peppering the second destroyer with railgun slugs, while the Vanguard unleashed a volley of fusion torpedoes that punched holes through enemy shielding. In the midst of it all, like a stubborn ghost, stood the Solace, half dead, leaking coolant yet unmoving. They're focusing on us again, Vega called. That cruiser wants us gone, it's ignoring the others. Because we embarrassed it, Roar muttered. Good, let's piss it off some more. He keyed into engineering. How's my cannon, Voss? Chief Voss coughed through the static, held together by spit, duct tape, and a prayer to Newton. Sir, that's enough, the fusion lance hadn't been fired since the first volley. Now it hums with a soft, threatening glow. Roar narrowed his eyes at the Runvac on the screen. Line it up, I want to punch through its eye socket. As the Solace maneuvered, dodging plasma bolts with sluggish grace, the crew felt something shift. They were no longer prey, they were the anchor, the symbol. Other human ships were arriving, smaller vessels, armed freighters, even a damn asteroid tug rigged with explosives. Humanity wasn't organized, but they were relentless, angry, and united in a galaxy used to folding civilizations like napkins. This didn't make sense, but that's what made humans dangerous, they didn't follow the script. The Solace reached firing position. Roar stood with one hand on the control. Fire. The fusion lance unleashed a beam of raw energy that sliced across the stars and tore into the Runvac's forward hull. The ship's armor buckled, the beam didn't destroy it, but it hurt it again. The Varnak couldn't understand why this kept happening, nor could the stars, but every human watching the feed from Earth, Mars, and beyond knew the answer, because that's what we do, we hold the line. A groan rippled through the Solace as the fusion lance overheated, lights dimmed, panels sparked, and a small explosion rocked the lower engine bay. Still, the crew stayed at their stations. They had crossed a threshold, now past fear, past survival. What kept them going wasn't orders, it was vengeance, pride, and the need to show the galaxy that humanity, battered and scattered, would not be erased without a fight. Outside, the Runvac reeled from the blast, its forward plating was scarred and molten. The Varnak, captain, if it could be called that, reeled from the input streams, its neural interface flooded with confusion. Why hasn't the Solace died? Why did it strike back harder? Varnak culture had no word for perseverance. Inside the human fleet, chaos found rhythm. The Vanguard circled wide, drawing fire from the destroyers. The Iron Widow had lost half its plating but continued to hammer its target with relentless precision, Martian war chants blaring across the comms, and the Solace still led the charge. Captain Roar paced the bridge like a caged animal, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the screens, with sweat dripping from his temple. Status on the Runvac? Badly damaged, sir. Its primary weapons are still online, but its shields are dropping below 30%. Then we're not done yet. The Varnak weren't used to fighting enemies that kept attacking after their own ship started falling apart. Their destroyers shifted tactics, attempting to break through the flanks and hit the Earthbound colonies directly. But they didn't get far, because now humanity wasn't just reacting, they were retaliating. From Saturn, a convoy of mining vessels entered the fight, loaded with makeshift warheads built from drilling charges. They weren't military grade, but they didn't have to be. They swarmed the Varnak flank like hornets, slamming into armor and ripping holes through cruisers piece by piece. On Earth, the broadcast was everywhere, schools shut down, traffic stopped, and no one spoke. Everyone just watched this one ragged ship still holding point, still refusing to move aside, the Solace, a symbol. Then, on the bridge, Lieutenant Vega called, "We're getting a transmission from Earth Defense Command." Roar raised an eyebrow. About time. They joined the conversation. A voice came through, distorted but urgent. "Captain Roar, this is General Elena Corvinus. You've bought us hours, reinforcements are en route, heavy cruisers and destroyer support, ETA 20 minutes. Can you hold?" He smiled, voice low and firm. "We've been holding. Just get here before we run out of ship." Cheers broke out across the bridge, tight, hard claps of relief. They weren't alone anymore, but 20 minutes was still 20 minutes, and the runback wasn't giving up. It powered forward, cutting through the void like a wounded beast on a killing run. Plasma turrets lit up, carving through the mining convoy, vaporizing 2 ships in seconds. One destroyer exploded, taking a section of Martian fighters with it. The Iron Widow limped back, its engines flickered, and the human line faltered on the Solace. "Lieutenant Vega. We've got a breach on Deck 6, hull integrity failing. Seal it off." Roar barked. "Emergency, pressure lock, route coolant to the main engine core, we're going to ram if we have to." Captain Vega started to reply, but Roar cut her off with a raised hand. "If we die loud." The crew braced as the Solace turned one last charge, one final scream in the face of extinction. Just as the ship's engine surged forward, ready to go out and fire, the stars behind them lit up. 3 Earth cruisers dropped from warp, the Dauntless, the Erebus, and the Pillar of Autumn, massive, hulking beasts of war. Guns charged and aimed. Roar laughed breathlessly. "You're late." The Dauntless fired first, twin plasma mortars slammed into the runback, splitting its flank. The Pillar of Autumn followed, battering the remaining destroyer until it cracked open like a steel egg. The line didn't break, the line surged forward, and the battlefield transformed. Where there was chaos, now there was coordination, where there was desperation, now surged fury. The Dauntless led the charge, its massive dorsal cannon firing volley after volley into the Varnak line. The soundless impact of its shots in space was a kind of poetry, beautiful, brutal, and exact. The Erebus followed on its flank, peeling away enemy fire like swatting flies, its shield system centuries ahead of what the Solace could manage. But no ship, not even these giants, drew more eyes than the Solace, scorched, lopsided, with one engine barely holding together, yet still holding the line like it was tethered to history itself. Captain Roar stood in silence, arms crossed, as the human fleet unleashed hell. "We got comms from the Pillar of Autumn," Vega said, breathless. "Admiral Dreyfus wants to speak directly." "Tell him to hold," Roar replied, still staring out the cracked viewport. "We've got unfinished business." The runback was retreating, bleeding sparks and core fluid from gaping wounds along its hull, the pride of the Varnak fleet. Their conqueror of stars was in full reverse, its shield generators flickering like dying candles. But Roar wasn't going to let it get away, not after all this. Turning to Vega, his voice grew low and cold. "That thing torched colonies, burned our people alive. If it leaves, it'll come back with an armada, we end it now." Vega didn't argue. She just nodded. Engineering was in ruins. Chief Voss coughed through the fumes on comms. "Captain, she's barely holding together. One more push might rip us in half." "I know," Roar said. "That's why you'll need to time it perfectly." The plan was madness. There was no backup strategy, no escape pods ready, just raw force and a very precise detonation. They were going to ride straight into the runback as weakened flank and set off every last warhead on the Solace, manually triggered point-blank where the cruiser's shield matrix was already failing. It was suicide, but Rohr didn't care. He sent a fleet-wide transmission, all ships, stand clear of the Solace. We're making one final pass. Admiral, if we don't make it out, finish the job. For a brief moment, silence reigned, then the Dauntless cut its engines and pulled back, clearing a path. The Solace turned, its broken nose pointing directly at the Varnak war cruiser. The stars shimmered behind it, and the fire of vengeance burned ahead. Inside the runback, panic stirred, mechanical, calculated, yet real. The humans weren't retreating, the logic array scrambled to make sense of it. Species under threat did not accelerate toward death, but humans did. The Solace went full burn. Every engine screamed, hull plating tore loose from the pressure, and fire erupted on 2 decks. The bridge lights died, systems went dark, yet the ship moved forward. The Varnak cruiser tried to turn away, too slow. Rohr stood at the manual detonation panel, key in hand. Vega strapped herself to the railing, her voice steady but wet with tears. "See you on the other side, Captain." He looked at her, then at the panel, inserted the key, and just as his hand hovered over the trigger he said, "This is the Erebus. Hold your fire, the runback is venting core. It's done. Rohr, you broke its spine." He froze as the screen showed the massive cruiser shuddering, its central engine flared, then collapsed inward. Blue light surged down its body, a cascade of uncontrolled overloads. The runback didn't explode, it crumbled piece by piece like a dying star. It broke apart into silence and dust, no detonation needed. The Solace stopped short, less than 500 meters from the remains. Barely alive, the crew sat in silence, then cheers, sobs, and screams of exhausted relief filled the space. Captain Rohr stepped away from the panel, his legs weak and breathing shallow. "Cancel the fireworks," he muttered. "I'm getting too old for martyrdom." And just like that, humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just survived, they had held the line and broken the invincible. The debris from the runback floated across the void like the drifting bones of a fallen god. For the first time in living memory, a Varnak cruiser had been destroyed, not by a superior force, not by advanced tech, but by what the Varnak once called a primitive species, and worse, by a single ship that should have never survived the first salvo. The Solace was towed back to the outer orbit of Titan by the Pillar of Autumn, its hull sparking and its engines silent, but its name now burned into history. Every news feed across the colonies replayed the footage, the last charge, the crumbling runback, the battered ship refusing to die. Captain Elijah Rohr, broken ribs and all, walked down the ramp as the docking bay hissed open, the gravity plating humming beneath his feet. His uniform was scorched, his eyes red, his knuckles bloodied, but he stood tall. He was greeted not by fanfare or generals, but by silence and a sea of eyes, engineers, soldiers, medics, and civilians who had risked everything to get the message out. Survivors, believers, the silence held for a beat, then applause exploded through the hangar like a war cry echoing off every wall and building, until even Rohr, tired and scarred, had to close his eyes and take a shaky breath. Not everyone, however, was cheering. In the command tower above the dock, General Elena Corvinus watched the scene with folded arms and a scowl. "These heroes make people harder to control," she grumbled. Turning to her aide, she asked, "Has EarthGov authorized an official commendation?" The aide replied carefully, "They're debating it." The Solace acted without formal clearance. "They're discussing protocol breaches, collateral loss, unauthorized combat engagement. They want to downplay him before he becomes a symbol," Corvinus snapped. "And he is a symbol. Now, across Mars, graffiti read, 'Hold the line.' On Earth, children played games pretending to be Captain Rohr of the Solace. On Europa, a woman kissed a photo of her dead brother, who had perished aboard the Solace, and whispered, 'You stopped them.' But far beyond the outer colonies, in the deep, cold stretches of space, the Varnak were not mourning, they were watching. The shattered Runvac had broadcast its last moments to the Empire before it died. The footage, corrupted and glitchy, still showed what mattered, a human ship defiant to the end, refusing to yield. The Varnaka's high executive watched the loop over and over, his claws twitching in irritation. A dozen warlords debated in their native tongue, sibilant, guttural, hateful. They did not mourn the loss of a ship, they mourned the loss of certainty. The humans had disrupted the order of things. This was not a resistance, this was an infection, and the Varnak had only one answer to infection: extermination. Send the writ of retaliation, the high executive hissed. The humans are no longer to be studied or monitored, they are to be erased. All of them. Back in the Sol system, Earth's political council scrambled. Half the senators wanted to negotiate, believing that diplomacy could still stop a war, the other half demanded rearmament. Then there was the new faction, young militants inspired by Roar, colonists, engineers, smugglers, ex-soldiers, and students. They didn't wait for governments, they organized online under the name of the Soulless Legion. They pledged to defend humanity by any means, with or without permission, and wore patches stitched with one phrase: "We hold the line." Roar didn't want fame, and he didn't want politics, but in the aftermath, when medals were tossed at him like apologies, he realized something: this wasn't the end. The Varnak would return, and next time they wouldn't underestimate humanity. 3 weeks passed since the battle. The Solace, barely a ship anymore, more like a floating coffin wrapped in legend, rested in dry dock above Mars. Engineers swarmed over it like ants on a dying tree, debating whether to scrap it or preserve it. Politicians wanted it as a museum piece, soldiers wanted it reforged into something deadlier, but the people wanted it remembered exactly as it was, wounded, but undefeated. Captain Elijah Roar sat alone in a hospital wing at Armstrong Base, half his ribs still wrapped, one lung recovering from vacuum exposure. The room was quiet, clean, and lifeless, the kind of sterile place that made him itch. A soft knock broke the silence. He didn't turn at first. Then the door opened, and Lieutenant Vega stepped in, her arms still in a sling and a slight limp in her walk. She looked tired but sharper somehow, hardened. "You're alive," she said, dropping a bag of lukewarm Martian coffee on the side table. "They fixed you up so you could sit through more goddamn interviews." She chuckled. "The admirals love you, they've made you a propaganda machine." "Yeah, let them put you in a ship held together with chewing gum and spite," Roar retorted. "Next time," he added after taking a bitter sip, his ribs protesting. "EarthGov, splitting." After a moment, she said, "Half want to prepare for war, half think we should beg for peace." "They won't get peace," Roar replied quietly. "Not after what we did, not after the runback. They're calling it a fluke." He met her eyes. "We humiliated them, Vega. And humiliation for an empire like that is like blood in the water, they have to answer for it. They'll come back." "I think they already have," she said, tossing a data chip onto his tray. "Intercepted signals, fringe colonies have gone dark, no word from Talon's reach, a freighter limped into Europa orbit with half its hull gone, a pilot swears it was a Varnik scout wing, small and fast, testing the outer lines." Roar clenched his jaw. Recon before the hammer. Meanwhile, EarthGov was too busy debating budget logistics and treaty wording. "They're not ready, we're not ready," he murmured. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the hum of the med equipment. Then Vega leaned in. "I want to rebuild the Solace." Roar blinked. "Rebuild? Not restore, not preserve, rebuild. Make her stronger, smarter, faster, but keep her soul, keep what made her ours." He looked at her for a long time. "They won't authorize that." She smirked. "I already started. The Soulless Legion has engineers volunteering from all over, even Martian techsmiths, half of them used to be criminals, the other half probably still are. He couldn't help but smile. Damn, pirates are finally good for something. Vega leaned forward, more seriously now. We can't wait for EarthGov to decide who we are. We already showed the galaxy who we are. Now we need to be ready to show them again, bigger. Roar nodded slowly. You get the ship. I'll get the crew far across space, in a cold void known only as Sector 95. Meanwhile, the Varnak War Council convened in darkness. Their language was jagged and aggressive, filled with clicks and growls that sounded like metal grinding against bone. In that massive, torchlit chamber, no voices were raised, only the hiss of strategy. A new campaign had been approved, not for conquest but for annihilation. The Sol system was to be erased, not subjugated, not studied, not spared. An overseer drone skittered forward, projecting a distorted image of the Solace, damaged, glowing, firing into the runback before it collapsed. One of the Varnak warlords snapped his claw against the stone floor, hard enough to crack it. They remember the name, the translator bot whispered in Terran, we will burn it from their memory. 30 Varnak destroyers were activated, 5 command dreadnoughts and 1 world killer-class siege engine. They were not coming to fight Earth, they were coming to cleanse it. On Earth, Roar stood in front of a growing crowd on the launch platform at Luna Prime. He hated speeches and politics, but this one mattered. Behind him, the Solace hung suspended in scaffold beams, still missing entire plates of armor, yet beneath the broken frame, engines had been replaced, weapons upgraded, she had a new core and a new name, Solace Requiem. Roar stepped forward, gripping the rail. I don't have a speech, he said, his voice echoing through the dome. I don't have quotes from dead leaders or fancy slogans. All I have is what I saw. He paused, then continued, I saw us holding the line when everyone thought we'd run. I saw us bleed, burn, and break together. I saw an empire blink for the first time in centuries because of one ship and a crew that refused to kneel. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the crowd. They're coming, and next time they won't come for battle, they'll come to wipe us out. And I say we don't give them the chance. The crowd was silent for a beat, then someone yelled, we hold the line, followed by another, until it grew into a chant, a roar, a wave. Roar smiled grimly. The line would hold, but this time, it wouldn't be one ship, it would be a fleet. The stars looked calm before the end. From the edge of the solar system, they appeared as pinpricks of peace, cold, beautiful, distant. But just beyond Pluto's icy grave, hidden in the black, the Varnik armada emerged from the void. It wasn't a fleet, it was a sentence, 30 destroyers, 5 dreadnoughts, and in the middle of them, eclipsing even the light of distant stars, floated the Ashvakal, the world killer, a siege engine older than many planets, capable of turning Earth's crust into vapor. Humanity's last transmission had been simple, we are still here. And this was the Varnaka's answer. Inside the Ashvakal's command core, 1 billion nanowires pulsed across the neural chamber, feeding information directly into the overmind. It wasn't a being, it was vengeance, encoded and sentient. The Varnak didn't want prisoners, nor surrender, they wanted to make an example. But this time, Earth was waiting near Saturn's orbit. The newly born Solace Requiem hummed with power, stronger, sleeker, still scarred by the memory of its last stand, but now reborn as a war machine crafted by unity, rage, and defiance. Captain Elijah Roar sat in the command chair, every nerve alight, his bones still ached from the last fight, and his mind carried the ghosts of those they lost, but his heart was ready. All ships, report in, called Lieutenant Vega from his right, her voice cutting through the static like fire. One by one, they came online, the Vanguard, Iron Widow, Osiris, Pillar of Autumn, and then dozens more ships that hadn't existed weeks ago, civilian convoys now armed with warheads, retired freighters converted into missile barges, even a few black market stealth rigs with crews grinning like wolves in the dark. The Soulless Legion was no longer just a symbol, it was an army. Roar rose slowly, his voice steady in the open calm. Make no mistake, they're not just coming for our worlds, they're coming to erase our existence. They want us forgotten. He looked at every screen, every crew. They call this their galaxy, they think we're just an inconvenience. Today, we remind them who the real problem is. Today, we hold the line. Then he sat, and space exploded. The first wave hit like a tsunami of light and metal. Varnak destroyers surged forward, firing plasma lances and quantum disruptors that tore into the human formation with ruthless precision. The Iron Widow took the brunt, its Martian hull groaning but unbroken. The Osiris launched counterstrike missiles, saturating the dark with clouds of flame. For every human ship that fell, another surged into its place. They didn't scatter, they didn't retreat, they pushed forward. The Solus Requiem was everywhere. Roar drove it like a blade between ribs, weaving through enemy fire, targeting weak points, and smashing apart 2 destroyers in the first 5 minutes of battle. Its fusion lance now fired in precise bursts, each one tearing through enemy armor like paper. But then came the Ashvakal, a single pulse from its central cannon sliced through space and vaporized 3 ships instantly. The explosion lit the void and sent shock waves across the battlefield. Vega. Ashvakal is charging for another shot. Roar screamed over comms. Don't blink, close the distance, get under it. That monster was built to break planets, not people. The Solus Requiem burned hard toward the Ashvakal, dodging debris and weaving between enemy lines. Other ships followed the vanguard, laying down cover fire, while the Erebus launched drones in all directions, swarm tactics in full effect. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the dreadnoughts began to move, not fast, but deliberately targeting Earth's orbital stations, humanity's heart. Roar saw it, he felt it in his bones, they were going for the kill. He opened fleet-wide comms.